The auctioneer called me on a Monday morning, 4 days after the auction, 4 days after what had appeared to be the single most successful fundraising evening our foundation had ever organized, and said, in the careful, measured voice of a professional who has discovered something in his own records that he genuinely wishes he hadn't found, Mrs. Whitmore, I need to talk to you about several of the winning bids from Saturday night. Specifically, the 3 lots that closed between 9:15 and 9:40. I've been reviewing the payment processing documentation, and something doesn't add up. I think someone in that room was placing bids they never intended to honor, and I think I know who. I was standing in my kitchen, still in the particular pleasant exhaustion of post-event recovery. The specific tiredness that comes after months of planning have finally converted into a single evening of results. And I set down my coffee cup and said, very quietly, "Tell me everything." Before I tell you what the auctioneer had found and what the bid receipts revealed when Sandra Perkins' forensic accountant laid them side by side against the payment records, tell me, where are you watching from right now? What time is it where you are? I read every single comment, and I genuinely mean that. And I want to be clear before we go further. This is a work of fiction written for entertainment. The names, the people, the events. None of it is real, and any resemblance to anyone living is entirely coincidental. My name is Claire Whitmore. I'm 33 years old, and for 6 years I've been married to a man named Daniel, a civil engineer, methodical, the kind of person who stress tests every structural assumption twice before he trusts it, which is, in his professional life, an exceptional quality, and, in our personal life, occasionally the thing that has kept us from making decisions that would have been mistakes. Daniel had a business partner for 11 years, a man named Victor Hale, who had been his closest professional ally and, for most of that time, someone I had genuinely considered a friend. The partnership had dissolved 2 years ago, not dramatically. No single catastrophic event, no screaming match, no betrayal I could point to cleanly. But in the slow, grinding way that partnerships sometimes end when two people's visions for what something should become have simply diverged beyond the point where they can be reconciled. Daniel had been fine with the dissolution. He had mourned it, the way you mourn the end of something that mattered, and then he had moved on with the particular pragmatic grace of someone who understands that not all endings are failures. Victor had not been fine with it. Victor's wife, Pamela, 41 years old, a woman I had known for 6 years through dinners and professional events, and the kind of social proximity that exists between the families of business partners, had apparently not been fine with it either. I had noticed, in the 2 years since the partnership dissolved, that Pamela's behavior toward me had shifted, subtly, in the particular deniable way of someone who has decided to be unkind but is too careful to be obvious about it. Small slights. Absences at events she would previously have attended. A specific quality of social warmth that had simply disappeared and been replaced with the precise minimum of cordiality that could not be called hostile. I had attributed it to the general awkwardness of a dissolved partnership. I had not attributed it, until the Monday morning phone call from the auctioneer, to something considerably more deliberate. The foundation Daniel and I ran, the Whitmore Community Arts Foundation, established 4 years ago to fund arts education programs in underfunded public schools across our county, held its annual charity auction every November. It was our primary fundraising event of the year, attended by approximately 180 guests, featuring a combination of donated art pieces, experiences, and services whose successful bids funded the following year's grant program. This year's auction had been, by every visible measure on the night itself, our best yet. Total apparent proceeds, $214,000. Our previous record had been $172,000. We had exceeded it by $42,000, and the room had felt, as the final gavel came down, like exactly what 4 years of careful work were supposed to produce. 4 days later, the auctioneer told me that 3 of the highest winning bids, a combined total of $68,000, representing a significant portion of our apparent record-breaking total, had been placed by a single bidder using 3 different names on 3 different bid paddles who had provided payment information during registration that, when the auctioneer's team attempted to process the post-event invoices, resolved to accounts that either did not exist or contained insufficient funds. 3 paddle numbers. 3 false identities. 3 fraudulent high bids specifically placed on the 3 highest value lots of the evening. Each one high enough to discourage legitimate competing bids, each one ultimately unpaid, each one reducing our actual realized total by $68,000. The auctioneer had security camera footage from the registration desk. He had reviewed it the previous day, and he had recognized, in the footage, someone he had seen before. At a previous year's auction, as a legitimate guest, Pamela Hale. Sandra Perkins received my call within the hour and had the auctioneer's documentation. The security footage, the bid records, the fraudulent payment information, the registration logs, within 48 hours. The picture they painted, when laid side by side, was unambiguous. Pamela had registered under 3 false names, each with slightly different spelling variations, each with contact information that led nowhere verifiable. She had obtained 3 bid paddles through 3 separate registration desk interactions, spacing them across the arrival window of the event so no single desk volunteer processed more than one of them. She had used the paddles selectively, sitting in different parts of the room for different lots, placing decisive bids on the 3 highest value items at moments strategically calculated to suppress legitimate bidder participation. And then she had simply not paid the 3 lots. A donated week at a coastal retreat property, a private dinner experience with a well-known local chef, and a commissioned artwork had been held pending payment, which meant they could not be reoffered to the next highest legitimate bidders without a formal process that would delay receipt of those funds by weeks. The total impact on our actual fundraising: $68,000 in fraudulent bids, with real bids of $31,000 for the same 3 lots from legitimate underbidders who had been outbid and had stopped bidding when the winning bids had gone above what they were willing to pay. Not $68,000 simply disappeared. $37,000 in real money that would have come in, that now required a reopened bidding process to recover. And, in 2 of the 3 cases, ultimately did not reach the same level, because the moments of competitive bidding energy that drive auction prices upward cannot be recreated after the fact. Our actual realized total, after the fraud was accounted for, $177,000. Still a record. Still meaningful. But $68,000 less than what the room had believed on the night that we had raised for arts education in underfunded schools. Pamela was charged with fraud, theft of services, and identity fraud, the last charge covering the false registrations, which had used invented identities to obtain bid authorization. The evidence was, Sandra told me, extremely clean. The security footage, the registration documentation, the payment trace, and, most importantly, a receipt from a party supply store 3 miles from the venue, time-stamped 1 week before the auction, showing the purchase of bid paddle materials in the specific color and format used by our event. A receipt that, when the detective investigating the case subpoenaed the store's loyalty program records, was linked to Pamela's registered account. She had bought the supplies herself. She had kept the receipt on her loyalty card. Some people, Sandra noted dryly, are meticulous about things that ultimately do not serve them. Pamela pleaded guilty to the fraud charge and was sentenced to 2 years of probation, full financial restitution of the difference between her fraudulent bids and the amounts recovered through the reopened bidding process, a total of $31,400, and a permanent civil judgment barring her from attending any event operated by our foundation. Victor called Daniel the week after the sentencing. The call lasted 4 minutes. Daniel told me afterward that Victor had said Pamela had acted without his knowledge, that he was sorry, and that he hoped someday the professional relationship could be. He had apparently searched for the word, repaired. Daniel had told him, kindly, that he appreciated the call and hoped Pamela got the support she clearly needed. and that the professional relationship was something he was not in a position to think about right now. The arts education grants went out on schedule, funded by the $177,000 we had actually raised, including, ultimately, the proceeds from the reopened bidding on the 3 lots, which Sandra had managed to schedule within the fiscal quarter. 32 students in 6 underfunded public schools received program funding that year. I know their names because we publish them in our annual report alongside the schools and the programs. I read that list every year when we publish it, because the list is what all of it is actually about, and I find it useful. When things like Pamela Hale happen, when the reason someone would want to undermine an arts education foundation is genuinely beyond my ability to fully comprehend, to come back to the list and remember what the work produces. 32 students, 6 schools. That's the number that mattered. Not 68,000, not 31,400, not 4 minutes on a phone call from a former partner who hoped something could be repaired. 32 students. And the year after that, and the year after that. Do you think Pamela's sentence was appropriate? Or should deliberately sabotaging a children's charity through auction fraud carry a harsher consequence? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved you, subscribe to the Family Ledger for a brand new story every single day. Hit that bell. You do not want to miss what is coming next.